Offspring of Incest, what's your story and how is your life? I was adopted when I was 2. I'm extremely close to my parents. They never kept it a secret that I was adopted. It really was no big deal until I got into those angsty teenage years and felt like I wanted to find my real parents. When I was 12, I found a small safe in my parents' closet and tried to find out anything I could. I found some information such as my original last name, but that was about it. Fast forward to about 6 years ago. I developed a bunch of pretty serious illnesses and was curious to see if anything was due to my genetic makeup. I met with a social worker from the state that I live in, and he facilitated getting some info for me. He offered me the opportunity to meet my biological mother. I declined. I received a packet with my medical information. It turns out that my birth mother claims that her brother is my biological dad. Every woman in my biological mom's family, grandmother, aunts, etc., had significant mental health issues and all of them had their biological children taken away due to serious neglect and alcoholism. So I don't drink. That kind of messed me up for a while, and I felt a tremendous amount of shame. I asked my mom if she knew that I was potentially a product of brother-sister incest, and she said that they found out during the adoption phase. However, I was also told to take the information with a grain of salt, since my birth mother apparently had a long history of mental illness. I don't think I will ever know for sure, but I try really hard not to think about it too much, and focus on my great parents, who love me endlessly, and gave me a truly terrific life. I still struggle with the possibility. It makes me feel kind of dirty. The only people that know are my parents and my husband. I secretly hope that my biological mom was making it up due to her illness. Actually, doing okay. My biological parents were father-daughter. I was adopted as a toddler when my birth mother died. She had another daughter, a few years older, with a boyfriend, who she physically abused, and her partner sexually abused. Her older daughter was later adopted. My adoptive parents are really great. They had 6 sons before me, wanted a daughter. I knew I was adopted. My family's white but I'm not, but I didn't know about it until I was a teenager. Went through a mini crisis of, holy I'm a monster, before coming to terms with it. I struggled for a long time about it, just because it isn't something you want people to know, but it's also something you desperately want to talk through, because it just doesn't make any sense and it's so taboo, rightly so. I hated the idea of therapy, and I felt strange talking to my parents about it, so I hid my pain for a long time. Eventually, a youth pastor who I disclosed to ended up helping me. I still talk regularly with him and his wife. I have a half-brother from my father and some woman. He's not a child from incest, who I do know and communicate with. He's 10 years older than me, lives near where I was born, Dakotas. We have a good relationship, but at a distance. I have had some medical problems, some of which are genetic, but none that scream incest. I'm a college athlete, D2 school, but I've had problems with tendon/ligaments and spinal problems for some time. I've had knee surgery and will soon need another, have scoliosis, bad degenerative disc disease, herniated discs, few other things. I had back surgery last summer and will have another one this summer. I also having my thyroid checked regularly, had some cysts form on it. We are monitoring them for growth, and I'm having regular blood tests. All of this sounds way worse than it actually is though. My day-to-day life is usually pain-free with some ice and ibuprofen. My main thing is I worry about marrying/having children. I didn't date much in high school, but I now have a great boyfriend. He was in the Marine Corps and has some PTSD, which he told me about last month when we started getting into the tell each other all our past garbage phase. I've yet to tell him though. I plan to, especially considering I want to have a family of my own one day, but I need to consult with a genetic counselor before I consider having children. Of course, adoption is always an option. I think the main factor with kids of incest is that adopting them makes people feel uneasy just because it isn't something they themselves know how to deal with. That's understandable. But what made all the difference in my life is being adopted by such wonderful people. My parents, my brothers, my extended family who knows my birth parents. They never once made me feel disgusting or unwanted or unloved. I can't imagine where I would be without them. My old neighbor was the product of a father raping his daughter. She had some cognitive impairment that seemed like early onset dementia, but was very slow to progress, diabetes and tons of mental health issues, hoarding, schizophrenia, agoraphobia, just about everything imaginable. If it was a thing back then, she would have also been on the autism spectrum. She had 2 children herself, non-incest, that were profoundly mentally ill and also somewhat intellectually disabled. The son was a horribly abusive paranoid schizophrenic and the daughter was a hoarder. They were all living together off of disability. Police raided their home and found they were living in filth with the dead rotting bodies of their pets everywhere, and the entire building was condemned by the health department. The son and daughter, adults in their 50s, wandered off never to be found. Their mother became homeless and ended up in a state-run nursing home. We were her only visitors. My parents are first cousins. I only got some hormonal problems, but it's not too serious. It's really embarrassing. The younger ones in my family don't know it and neither do any of my friends. It would be horrible if they knew. A girl in my school once joked about my parents being cousins because I'm Middle Eastern and I nearly got an heart attack, but I just laughed it off since I knew it was just a joke. My brother is my father. It's up. My mother groomed him from a young age to be her perfect lover, and they had me when he was 17 and she was 35. I grew up thinking he was my brother and that my dad had left the family, but I found out the truth when I walked in on my brother and mother having sex. When I turned 14, I was absolutely horrified and I confronted them and they told me the truth. I felt betrayed and disgusted, so that night I took my belongings and left home. Haven't spoken to them since. They were the only family I had, since my mother also left her family and never spoke to them again at a young age. I'm 24 now. I work with 2 children who were born because of incest. The boy is microcephalic, small head, cerebral palsy, severe ADHD and developmental delay. He is almost a teenager, but is as functional as a 6-year-old, and is on a toddler education level. He will probably need care his whole life. His parents were uncle/niece, but his mom was delayed as well. The girl was born from a brother and sister. They have 4 kids total, and she is the only one with issues. I swear she has Marfan syndrome. Her joints are incredibly loose, and she has very long fingers and toes. Her brain isn't able to process light properly, so she's legally blind. She is also severely autistic, which is probably unrelated to her parents being siblings, but it actually benefits her because she is incredibly smart. She is 10 now and is learning to communicate well and is excelling in school these days. She is actually starting going to regular school now in a special class because she is blind, but we have hopes that she will be able to go to the normal classes in a few years. She is still not potty trained, but that's expected when you have her level of autism and being blind. The worst thing I've ever seen as a pediatric CNA isn't the children from incest though, it's the children from parents who drank or did drugs while pregnant. Such beautiful children who would have been perfectly fine if their mothers hadn't put poison in their bodies. I have some acquaintances, 2 Indian sisters, adopted by an American family when they were babies. Apparently they were the product of their uncle raping their mother. These girls grew up to be gorgeous geniuses, so it worked out okay for them. I'm not her offspring, but was a teaching assistant at a private school for children that were either the public school system kicked out or could not handle. I'll never forget this girl. Her grandpa was her father. She was 19 or 20 and had to wear diapers all of the time. She suffered from severe autism and was the absolute sweetest girl. This was a couple of years ago, but if I remember correctly, she was doing schoolwork at about a 2nd to 3rd grade level. The last day of school, her and almost all of the kids were so sad and did not want to leave for summer as we were pretty much the only steady/constant figures they had. I actually ended up seeing her while I was walking home from work about a year after the school closed. She still remembered my name and gave me a big hug. I'll never forget it. There was a woman in my pregnancy and infant loss group that had a really tragic case of accidental incest. We live in a town where there's a military base and soldiers from Great Britain often come and train there. Well, This woman met a soldier at the club one night, and they hit it off, and started seeing each other. They discovered they both had family from a little obscure town in England. She was born there, and her mother brought her to Canada when the mom split up with the dad. She grows up not ever having contact with her father as a result. Anyhow, this girl ends up pregnant by this soldier, and doesn't get proper prenatal care other than her anatomy scan at 18 weeks. When the baby was born, he had severe deformities, and was lacking a bunch of his bones in his limbs. At Children's Hospital, they do a genetic workup on the parents and baby, and within a couple of days, the baby dies. The genetic counselor ended up contacting the lady, and telling her she needed to come in for an appointment. She does, and it turns out that her and the soldier are half siblings, and they both had a specific gene mutation that had been passed on to their baby, resulting in whatever disease caused him to not develop parts of his skeleton. In the course of a few days, she lost her baby, found out her boyfriend was actually her brother, and went off the deep end and started using all kinds of drugs. Listening to her story made me feel uncomfortable and physically sick. It was awful. I felt sorry for her, but also felt disgusted, even though I knew it wasn't really her fault. My parents are first cousins. They share the same grandfather. It's not weird at all in my family. It's talked about openly for as long as I can remember. I remember hearing stories about my mom and dad growing up a couple streets away from each other. My brother and I are not affected at all by them being first cousins, just the divorce, alcohol, and drug abuse growing up. Meh. Not me, but a kid at school that I works up at occasionally. His mother is the direct product of incest. Her father raped his daughter, and he is an absolute delight, let me tell you. He spends most of his time in a special ed classroom with 3 or 4 other students, and he is always helping out his classmates and his teachers when he can. He saw me at a local event and wanted to introduce me to his mother. She's got no teeth and just looks ragged and worn, but she is one of the sweetest people I've ever talked to. He'll be alright. I think he's being groomed to be a custodian or something. But it's nice to know that such horrible conditions don't have to define an individual. I have 2 siblings-in-law, adopted, obviously, who are the product of incest. Both have mental deficiencies. One is in legal trouble relating to child porn. The other has Prader-Willi syndrome, meaning they will eat anything, and a huge amount, due to never ever feeling full. Neither will ever live completely independently. To be honest, I didn't consider myself a product of incest until I read the comments here. My parents are first cousins. I come from a country where that's normal, and lived all my life in another country where it is the norm. I think I'm pretty normal, and my siblings too. We all ended up being atheists in a country where you can get killed for that. Smart and open-minded. So in the eyes of my culture, there's probably something wrong with us. My parents were step-siblings. They were raised together from young teenagers, but didn't have me until my mom was 28, I think. Anyway, my father robbed a convenience store while my mother was pregnant and was in jail for 4 years. He got out, and they got back together. He did a bunch of heroin 6 months later, and my mom found him dead. 6 months after that, my mother dropped me off with some of her junkie friends and never came back. They left me at a church, and eventually the police found me. My mother was found dead in her car from an overdose the next day. My grandmother swears she was murdered by the mob for threatening to inform on them about my father's death. I really have no idea, but I think it's a coping strategy. I was raised by my mother's mom and father's dad, and they were extremely normal college-educated people. I've got a host of the mental issues my parents did, but I keep putting one foot in front of the other. Telling the story of my parents just sounds like it happened to somebody else now.